Hey there everyone, welcome to our panel, Intersection of Plurality and Fandom. Our fandom name is Gqueercatboy, and our system name is Lunastus Collective. We've been a plural system for almost 40 years now, and have been involved in fandom since the early 90s. We're really happy to be here today. Apologies in advance if you hear any meowing. Our cat is apparently very invested in this panel as well. This panel's purpose is to help the audience understand plurality a bit better and how plurality can impact experiences in fandom. We'll start out with an explanation of what plurality is, before moving into how plurality can impact fandom experiences, and how plural and non-plural folks can exist in fandom more peacefully. Due to disability, this panel is pre-recorded. We'll be in chat to try and answer any questions you may have along the way. So first things first, what is plurality? In the simplest terms, plurality is a state of being more than one. Most often, this is described as being more than one mind, soul, or identity within one body, but the plural spectrum is massive, with many different ways it can present. Some people are plural and their experience is, there's different versions of me, but they're still me. Others are plural and their experience is, we're an entire society of individual, separate people. Like so many other neurodivergent experiences, the best way to understand how it works is for someone to just ask. The image of plurality that most people outside the community tend to think of is DID, or dissociative identity disorder. Another is OSDD, or other specified dissociative disorder. Complex dissociative disorders can go by many other names, especially since, different standards around the world, different textbooks. Yeah. But DID and OSDD are the most well known. Not all people who are plural will have a dissociative disorder, and not all with dissociative disorders consider themselves plural. It's best to not make assumptions. And because it's a medical history thing, it's best to not bring it up unless the person you're talking to is okay with that. It often doesn't matter anyways. Plural folks with a dissociative disorder aren't that much different from plural folks without one. Plural is the generally accepted umbrella term for everyone in the community. The term multiple or multiplicity is also common. It's an older term, but still used among older community members and community members who experience a greater degree of separation. For ease, we'll use plural throughout this panel. While there are a lot of terms plural folks can use to describe their situation, one of the most common you'll hear is system. Some may also use the words collective, group, crew, and others. Individuals within a system may use the term alter, headmate, sysmate, or system member. Plural folks who don't see themselves as completely separate might call themselves median system. There's a huge spectrum between singlet, or non-plural, and multiple. Many systems will have a system name that they go by. The name often is symbolic in some way, whether it be an aesthetic that the system in whole enjoys, something they value, or a reference that's important, or funny, to the system as a whole. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions about plural folk and systems, mostly due to a sensationalized portrayal in fiction, a lack of understanding in society as a whole, and a deep lack of education and compassion in the medical field. Plurality is often assumed to be caused by childhood trauma, and while this is a common cause, plenty of plural folks attribute the cause of their plurality to other things. Trauma that didn't start in childhood, negative life experiences, dealing with medical issues, loneliness, intense daydreaming, dreams, spiritual means, and the purposeful creation of others are all things that plural folk have attributed to the formation of their plurality, and more. Currently, no scientific data exists that proves or disproves all the way that plurality can form. While there is a loud but small group of folks within the plural community that harass other folks over the right way to be plural, including what causes are or aren't valid to them, the majority just want to exist in peace. Similarly, it's often assumed by some that all forms of plurality must be disordered in order to be real, and there exist plural folks within the community who make it their mission to attack anyone who says plurality can be non-disordered. Still, once again, no proof exists that plurality must be disordered. In fact, the DSM and similar medical texts often make a point that without marked distress and or dysfunction, disorder doesn't exist. Not in their wheelhouse, doesn't really matter clinically. Non-disordered parties are often not the subject of studies, so of course there's not great research on non-disordered plurality. But there's not really great research even on disordered plurality, mostly due to biases in the medical field. It's hard to get research on something that people don't even think is possible. And yet, here we are, existing. Many plural people do in fact live their lives without great distress or dysfunction from being plural. Often, most problems related to being plural come from ignorance in society, a lack of quality medical care, misrepresentation in the media, and infighting within the community. For those who are disordered, the plurality is often not the issue in and of itself, but a lack of communication and cooperation between the selves, system members, or whatever term fits best. It's a bit similar to autism in that way. Yeah, it can get to a point where it's a problem for some, but for many others, it's more people's ableism that's the problem. And often, learning about having it and how to work with it helps more than trying to make it just, quote, quote, go away. Moving on to other popular myths, and it's a big myth that plurality is rare, when that's not actually the case. Most estimates put DID alone at about 1 to 3% of the world population, and that's not counting those who are undiagnosed, who have other dissociative disorders, and who aren't disordered at all. Even if we stuck to the 1% guesstimate, that's over 81 million people worldwide. The entire population of the UK, France, Thailand, South Korea, and Canada are all under, sometimes far under, 70 million each. Germany is just over 83 million people. Think of how often you've talked to someone who is, or knows, someone from any of those countries. Yeah. It's a myth that people who are plural don't realize it, that if they were really a system, they wouldn't be aware of it. At one point in history, it was part of psych literature that reporting had to come from friends, family, or medical professionals. This is no longer the case, and self-reporting is allowed, but it's always been true that many plural folk know that they're plural. It's no shock that medical professionals have routinely stripped neurodivergent people of agency, including in talking about their own lived experiences. That's very slowly getting better, especially as awareness increases and people get the words to describe their experiences. Knowledge is power. This holds true here too. Amnesia between parts, alters, selves, headmates, whatever term people use, is not always present, especially as time goes by and communication gets better. Plural systems often learn to communicate over time, learn to control switches, if they do switch at all, and establish some sort of shared memory between folks. Therapy sometimes helps facilitate this, especially with a good therapist, but it can be done over time, slowly, as a system simply gets used to one another. Even systems with that type of amnesia can help reduce it over time, and are often still at least aware that something is going on, even if they're not entirely sure what. One of the worst myths, of course, is that plurality is inherently harmful or dangerous. Movies, television shows, books, comics, video games, for over 50 years, have painted plurality, often calling it split personality, as some sort of trope where, gasp, the person you thought was an innocent victim was actually the killer, but didn't know it themselves because it was their evil other self. The reality is, plural folk are, like most other neurodivergent people, more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of it. Are there shitty plural people? Yeah, of course. There's shitty people in any social group. But plural folk aren't any more likely to be bad people. Most plural folks and most members within plural systems just want to live their lives in peace, including within fandom spaces. Unfortunately, being in fandom when you're plural comes with a wide range of difficulties. There's of course the usual struggles, ones that exist everywhere. People not understanding what plurality is, thinking it's a disease at best, or non-existent at worst. People treating you like you're a role player. But there are also struggles related specifically to being in fandom spaces too, that a lot of folks, plural and non-plural people alike, don't often think about. Or don't think about until they're already dealing with it. The most surface level issue is the overlap between system medicalism and anti-shipping. System medicalism, or sysmeds, is when someone sees plurality as being inherently trauma-formed, or worse, inherently disordered. They are convinced that there's no way plurality can exist outside of being pathological, and this attitude is harmful for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's not something that's proven at all, despite them often claiming that it's scientific fact. Secondly, it can push plural people into digging for trauma, which may not exist at all, or if it does, can lead to people re-traumatizing themselves because they weren't ready to confront it. Not everybody is ready to dig into their trauma, and sometimes they need help when they do that they might not have at that very moment. Thirdly, even if it was true that plurality is only trauma-formed, ever, the idea that it's always disordered is flat out untrue. Disorder requires marked distress and/or dysfunction, and it leads to the untrue idea that plurality is always distressing or always dysfunctional. The insistence that plurality is inherently pathological often hurts the very people system medicalists claim to be trying to protect. Trauma-formed systems can feel pushed out of their own spaces for not being diagnosed, and systems with dissociative disorders can heal from those disorders while still remaining plural. So where does that leave them? That's not even touching how divisive and toxic it is to the plural community. When you have one side saying, hey, we exist, and another side saying, no, you don't, you're misremembering or faking it, it makes it really hard to have healthy discussions and support. It makes it hard to open up to people, even people you might have trusted at some point. It makes it hard to find community. And it can make it hard to even just exist, because a lot of people who engage in system medicalism will also use cruel, even violent language, like telling people to harm themselves, accusing them of harming survivors, accusing them of mocking people's trauma, etc. If this sounds familiar, you're not wrong. For whatever reason, there's a distinct overlap between system medicalists and anti-shippers. Our personal theory is that anti-shipping behavior is tied directly to radfem rhetoric that exploded within fandom in the early 2000s. Because fandom is often a safe haven for traumatized people, a lot of these young people who entered fandom spaces were already plural or plural-leaning, and the fandom environment of, you're dangerous, you're a predator, you're trying to hurt me, you're mocking real trauma, transferred over from fandom into their views of the plural community. So, even though non-traumagenic plurality and non-disordered plurality have been a recognized thing since the mid-90s at least, around 2008 there was the increased whisperings of system discourse. By 2014, it was a dumpster fire. When you look at the timeline, the people who were teens in 2007 when Tumblr opened were 20 to 25 in 2014, which was about the age of the first generation of system medicalists who also grew from Tumblr, and ta-da, anti-shippers. They passed the toxicity onto the next generation of teens who would be 24 to 30 now. While we don't have an official study or anything to look at, I'm confident in saying that the radfem to anti-shipper to sysmed pipeline makes sense in that time frame, and explains the general age of intensely rabid teens now, plus a strangely strong presence of 20-somethings, and a smaller but deeply unpleasant group of 30 to 40-year-olds that are radfemi fandom goers. It makes it a complete cesspool to navigate, because as a plural system, not only do you have to worry about anti-shippers, people who will tell you to kill yourself over a 2-year fictional age gap, you then have to worry about those same people also being plural and saying the same things about your very existence. Because sadly, anti-shippers do take that same attitude and those same behaviors into other communities, as anyone who's M-spec queer or trans in the wrong way can tell you. It's hard enough to be called something horrible over fiction, but it's an added level of awful to also be told your very being, the core of who you are, something that is probably not anything you can change in your lifetime, is fake, wrong, gross, harmful, etc. Even over stuff that is commonly known to happen in the plural community, like non-human system members having only a few system members or having a lot of system members. Doesn't matter. They're still going to get you over it. Perhaps worse, though, is when it's not a perfect circle. There are anti-shippers who are inclusive to all plural people, which is a bucket of water to the face if you make a system friend who then doxes you because you ship Sasunaru. There are cis-meds who are pro-shippers, which is equally shocking because you think you're making a fandom friend only to have them turn around and call you a gross role player who's co-opting people's suffering if you don't conform to what they think plurality is supposed to be. Trying to build community shouldn't involve purchasing a flak jacket, but here we are. Beyond the problem of just trying to find people who don't want to see you put in jail for fictional crimes or having a brain that works differently than others, there's several other deeper issues that can make existing in fandom spaces hard for plural folks. PTSD isn't unique to plural folks, and not all plural folks have PTSD, but for those of us who do, it can be a difficult thing to manage, especially when people don't tag things properly. Even among pro-shippers, pro-fics, whatever you want to call it, very often we'll run across art or fic, on Blue Sky especially, that's marked as not safe for work or adult, but then that's it. No fandom, no ships, no content warnings, nothing. And it sucks, because if you want to look at art and read fic, but it's not tagged properly, it can be scary to try and wade through a sea of contains adult content posts with no other context, or fics without proper warnings. What makes this especially difficult is that for plural systems, not all system members will have the same squicks or triggers. What's fine one day might not be fine the next. While it doesn't happen to all plural folks, amnesia between system members can also cause some problems in fandom. Imagine you have 5 friends and you're all trying to use the same computer as each other and trying to share the same accounts, same social media, talk to the same people, upload your own creative works on the same AO3 account. Unless you have great communication skills or note-taking, it might be hard to remember who talked to which friends and about what, or what videos, stories, movies, games that someone else engaged in. If Dave loves Gundam and has friends from a Discord server for Gundam fans, what happens when Jessica takes front and doesn't really remember what Dave was up to? What happens to Dave's friends, his projects? What happens to Jessica's friends and projects if Dave comes back? It can be a struggle to sort out who's doing what and keep up, as most creative folk here probably realize. A lack of consistency can really hinder growth in a fan base if that's something you're trying to accomplish. Intermission. I need to take a drink of water. Lack of accessibility features also lead to a lot of stress within fandom spaces. It can be difficult for larger systems to all have their own unique Tumblr accounts, for example, or different AO3 accounts. It's easy enough to just suggest making different email accounts for social media in AO3, but that can get overwhelming and hard to remember. Often you have to find workarounds with Xkit, add-ons, and the like that might not always work properly. Discord servers often don't have Pluralkit, an app that allows plural folks to have their own proxies, profile pics, usernames, and more. Even when they do, they too often try to limit it to people with DID or OSDD only, which of course isn't great because A, that means the plural folk who created Pluralkit wouldn't be able to use their own creation. B, DID and OSDD aren't the only ways to be plural. And C, it would require people to disclose a medical condition to the entire Discord server in order to use a bot that the creators explicitly said can be used by anyone. It makes no sense. Offline meetups with other fans, including conventions, can be difficult for plural folk. A large portion of the plural community is trans, non-binary, disabled, living in poverty, and or neurodivergent in other ways. Plurality aside, it's a huge struggle to attend meetups when you're broke, as most people know, but also when the venue might not be accessible for disabled people, or in a safe location for queer, especially trans people. COVID is still happening, and a lot of people and places have abandoned masking, one of the most surefire ways to help keep immune-compromised people safe. When you add in plurality and the fact that many plural folk experience dissociation, loss of time, or amnesia between system members, it's really tough. What does a system do if a child system member gets triggered into front? If they black out and lose time? If they dissociate and can't respond? Most non-plural people, even if they do understand plurality, don't know how to handle these situations. And worse, many don't bother to try and learn. Which really sucks, especially if these people are your friends or family. With offline meetups, safety as a plural person can also come into play. Do the people you're meeting up with know you're plural or part of a system? Do they understand what that means? Can you trust them to not treat you like crap, even if you've talked online before? Can you trust them to use the correct names and pronouns and to not be weird if you switch with someone else? What do you do if they start making uncomfortable comments or asking weird questions? What if it's a situation that's hard or impossible to get out of? These are very real concerns for plural folk and can lead to increased isolation. Circling back to being queer as well, it can be especially difficult if your system is comprised of several different sexualities and genders. Even people who might be okay with someone who's trans or asexual or kinky might be less okay when one day they're talking to an ace trans lesbian and the next they're talking to a straight cis guy. They might not fully understand why pronouns or gender terms that were okay yesterday aren't okay today, or why you were fine having breasts yesterday, but today you feel uncomfortable and dysphoric. And again, too many people just don't ask about it or listen with compassion. It's a deep social stigma that can really hurt plural folk that basically boils down to the idea that plurality is too complicated or too weird to fully understand, so why bother? People often don't want to accept that a body can house more than one person, let alone persons who might have different genders, sexualities, appearances, or even species. And they especially don't want to accept that a body can house more than one person, and one or more of those people are fictional characters. Woo! Which leads directly into one of the hardest parts of plurality in fandom, being a fictive. So, what are fictives? Fictives are, to put it in the simplest terms, system members who identify as being a fictional character or from a world that is considered fictional. The fictional character or universe is often called the source or source material, sometimes canon, as is with fandom. Some people get fictives confused with fictionkin. Fictionkin is someone who identifies as someone who is considered fictional in this world, or from a world that is fictional. So the definition is pretty close, but fictives are purely folks within a system, whereas fictionkin can be part of or outside of a system. Fictives also tend to arrive in a system knowing who they are and have a single identity, whereas fictionkin are born as one person, but later on awaken to a secondary identity. It's sort of like being a fictive is picking up an open box and being able to see exactly what's inside, whereas being fictionkin is like waking up, getting out of bed, and tripping over a box you didn't know was there before. And now you have to unpack it to figure out what it is. Of course, there's some blurry areas in between. Not all fictives enter a system knowing who they are. And sometimes someone who identifies as fictionkin realizes that their kin types are, system members, that sort of thing. Fictives can also have kin types or have multiple sources. Fictionkin can have a system or, be a system member and then have like multiple kin types. But it gives you a basic idea for how the two are different. While fiction aren't inherently plural, I will mention them a few more times going forward, because they're also quite stigmatized and maligned in fandom spaces. Fictives are fairly common within plural systems and have been documented since at least 1985. House of Chimeras, a plural system who does a lot of advocacy and plural system history keeping, notes that in a 2021 paper that psychiatrist Dr. Richard Kluft, in his 1985 book, Childhood Antecedents of Multiple Personality, that one young patient has system members who identified as or were based off of the Hulk, Captain Kirk, Spock, and Flintstone characters. In regards to Spock, even Leonard Nimoy, the original actor for Spock, said this in his 1995 book, I Am Spock. Quote, let's open this book with a couple of shattering confessions right up front. 1. I talk to myself. And 2. I hear voices in my head. Or rather, I sometimes talk to an aspect of myself, and I often hear one specific voice replying in my head. A very calm, very rational voice, one I suspect many of you are familiar with. While we can't say for sure that Leonard Nimoy was plural, the fact that his book opens with a foreword from Spock, that he and Spock converse throughout the book, and he outright treats Spock like a very real person and part of himself living in his head, well, it's interesting. And it goes to show that fictives aren't a new concept, nor are they something that was invented by TikTok, Tumblr, or whatever. It's not uncommon to find plural systems with many fictives, or entirely comprised of fictives. And is it any wonder? Even just from a psychological standpoint, fiction is a great comfort to many, and since plurality is often tied to trauma, abuse, loneliness, adapting to negative life circumstances, intense stress, or even sometimes maladaptive daydreaming, even autism, it makes sense that many systems would turn to fiction for comfort and end up imprinting on certain stories. That's not at all the only explanation for why fictives happen, of course, but still. We're all stories, and it makes sense that some stories speak to us during times of adversity in ways that leave lasting impressions. Or a new timeshare situation in your noggin. Some systems see plurality as purely psychological. Some attribute spiritual explanations to their systems. Some see it as a mix of both. The same is true with fictives. For some fictives, their source is a template, and they don't actually think that they are that character or from that world. For others, they do see themselves as a version of that character or really being from that world. The latter tend to run more in spiritual circles or believe in a multiverse theory. Sometimes both exist within the same system. Me personally believe that both are fine and okay, and there is really nothing to prove it's wrong, so it's best to just listen to people and accept that they understand themselves better than we ever will. Life is short, and it isn't inherently harming anyone, so there's no reason to disparage someone for how they think their system or their system members work. Fictives often have memories of their source lives that may or may not adhere to canon events. Entire childhoods, entire adult lives, skill sets, relationships, just like anyone else, they can vary between people who may share a similar name. For people who see themselves from purely a psychological lens, they may call these pseudo-memories. For people who see their pasts from a more spiritual lens, they may call these exo-memories. Memories can be comforting or traumatic. Again, same as with anyone else. This angle becomes important when interacting with fandom. Unfortunately, as stated earlier, there's a distinct overlap between system medicalism and anti-shipping behavior and rhetoric. And because fictives are a fairly common occurrence in systems, you can imagine how this could get bad fast. Most systems are live and let live sorts. We kind of have to be. We tend to be quiet, blend in as much as possible, don't rock the boat. But then you have the terrible storm that happens when a system of anti-shippers have fictives. Too many times, we've seen fictives start arguments with artists or take shit way too personally because, well, that's me. How dare they do this to me? And it sucks because it makes things worse for everyone. Take it from us, we don't like the whole concept of XYZ part of the community makes things bad for the rest of us. But it's also true that if someone's first exposure to fictionkin or fictives is, "Don't ship that gross thing, that's me, you're victimizing me, go kill yourself," then it makes it much harder to convince that person that such reactions are just a loud minority. And the thing is, it's controllable. It's a choice. If something upsets you, you can choose to step back. You can choose to mute, block, whatever. And most fictives and fictionkin will do that. Even if you identify as a version of that actual character, you can recognize that the fake doll people are playing with has nothing to do with you. But we're all familiar with how anti-shipping mentality tends to go, and so some people get soured on the concept of fictives and kinfolk because getting attacked and accused of harming people sucks. Especially when, you're coming at it as purely fiction, and then you have a BNHA character telling you they're real and you're personally harming them. We understand how it can feel fucking bananas. And for those of us who don't do that crap, it's still in the back of our minds when we engage with fandom. What if we want to get involved in a fandom not as Discord user number 42069, but as ourselves, openly, honestly? The embarrassment, fear, and stigma is immense, and a lot of people just don't overcome that hurdle. There's usually no point. There's usually no payoff for it. It can tend to make things worse. It's terrifying to consider opening up as who you really are when more and more people have had negative experiences with people in your community. And yes, people should realize that, okay, this bad behavior is probably an exception, and I should be more open-minded to people who are less hostile. But people often will still remember those negative experiences. It's normal, and it can be hard to override that. Going into a server, forum, or group and seeing people talk about system stuff and fictives in such negative ways because of bad experiences with others is embarrassing. Even if, logically, you know that people shouldn't be judging an entire group of people based on a few bad apples. It can stop a lot of systems from speaking up about who they are. And, flat out, people shouldn't be harassing others over fanworks, no matter what a source, character, or ship means personally to them. Even if that negative bias isn't there from previous encounters, it's still scary. It's a weird thing, right? Like, oh, you think you're a fictional character. Oh, you think you're from Narnia or the Pokemon universe or Middle-earth, whatever. We're aware of how it sounds, and it's scary to go in wondering if people will be cruel to you, judge you, or worse, pretend to be accepting when they're actually not. So most of us hide and don't share anything about being plural, let alone being a system with fictives from that fandom. I'm sure a lot of non-plural people can relate wanting to hide parts of yourself or your life that seem too weird, even if they're completely harmless. The stigma around being plural in general also makes it scary. Fictives have it, I'd argue, even worse. It's impossible to say if the people you're talking to will even acknowledge that you exist. Even if they do, they may only see you as a coping mechanism, not an actual person with your own unique identity. They often won't see you as who you know yourself to be. Often you're merely just some advanced version of cosplaying, or a role player gone off the deep end. The opposite end of the spectrum is when people do believe you, and then promptly get weird about it. It's a paradox of being perceived, right? Yay, people see you! Oh no, people see you. But as a fictive, you risk that. Even if people see you as real, they sometimes will assume things about you, act like they know you, or even project their opinions about canon onto you, positive and negative. And part of that is because plurality is seen as this rare, fascinating thing. Like, ooh, look at this interesting species of insect. Lack of knowledge doesn't always create situations where people don't believe you and think you suck. It can also create situations where people do believe you and then treat you like something to study, a shiny new toy to play with, some sort of fantasy come to life, or some sort of weird fandom punching bag. There's also the aspect of fiction is an escape for most people. As a fictive in a system, you're keenly aware of the potential problems your existence can cause with that. If people accept you and believe you, then what does that mean for them in their fandom experiences? Can they also separate in their mind fandom and the part of their show, movie, book, game that is fiction, and you? We've seen it firsthand that sometimes it can make things really awkward. It can be hard to enjoy a media source the same way if you know someone who feels personally impacted by it. It can become less of an escape because it's not just fiction anymore. And we don't want that, you know? Like, we all have our own fictional escapes. We want people to be able to enjoy what they enjoy. It's not that much different from having a non-fictive friend who might find themselves triggered by something in fiction, or media that has similarities to real events that happened, like wars. But some folk have an attitude of, yeah, but if this is somehow real or feels like someone's real life, that means I can't enjoy it anymore. And it sucks as a fictive to feel like, well, I can't talk about what this means to me because then it'll ruin people's enjoyment of the thing. It's still a very two-way street. If you, as a fictive, know that something upsets you, avoid it or ask friends to not talk about it around you. And don't shame or harass people for liking it. If you have a friend who's a fictive in a system, know that you can still enjoy things, but you might have to tag things more or not share specific things with them, just as you would with anyone else. Fictives are still, in the end, just people. And the same is true for problematic fictives, who also tend to have a really hard time even within plural spaces. A lot of fictives of villains, or characters who had complicated or problematic relationships, often get judged as being uniquely dangerous even by other systems. People see them and think that they must approve of what happened in the canon source, or somehow would be willing to hurt people in this world, and it makes no sense at all. It'd be like if someone said, oh, I was a thief in a prior life, and people around them started saying, well, you can't come into my house, you might rob me. Like, what? First of all, most systems can't, or don't, choose what fictives show up. Even for systems who say they do have some degree of influence over it, it's often done because a character is seen as having some sort of trait that can help the system. Think of your favorite villains. I'd hazard to guess that most are charismatic, no nonsense, powerful, don't let themselves get pushed around, or are resourceful. A lot of villain types are appealing because they were the outcasts or underdogs who survived, or the successful business person who had it on lock, or the little cockroach who keeps coming back no matter how beaten they seem. And that can be appealing. Plus, let's face it, a lot of villains are still very queer-coded, or have neurodivergent traits, or are survivors of abuse, and that alone can result in the Icarus flying too close to the sun phenomena that is relating too hard to a character while being plural. And then they get shit for it. It's absurd. Are there systems with problematic fictives who do or say shitty things? Yeah, of course. Again, we're back to the fact that every group has assholes. But most just want to have a clean slate, start over, and create a new life for themselves here. You can't assume anything about a fictive just because of their source media. Which is true for all fictives, not just villain types. You don't know a fictive just because you know their source. Most fictives will have different histories, different personality traits or beliefs, different appearances, sometimes to the point where you might barely recognize them. They might have different names, genders, sexualities, ages. They might have different hair, skin, or eye color. They may have wildly different relationships. It's just not good to make assumptions. Treat people like people. We've had personal experiences with so many of these things. We've been harassed for having bad guys here who were almost nothing like their source. And people kept their harassment up even after we tried to explain all this. We've had people get weird after we came out, either acting like we would suddenly murder them in their sleep, or objectifying us and treating us like their personal fanfic trope come to life. We've had someone purposefully trigger a system member here with images of someone who hurt them, like multiple times a day for days on end, before we ended that friendship. We've run into anti-shippers who harassed us over relationships within our own system, something that really can't harm anyone outside of us, and isn't even harming us. And dealing with non-plural folk who talk down to us, treating us like broken toys, dismissed us for being crazy. We've struggled with our own personal shame about our system and the people here before we learned to not give a shit. It's difficult. It's not rainbows and sunshine all the time, but it's also not constant misery and suffering either. It's just a thing that's made us have trouble existing in fandom spaces, and it's made it stressful and scary, especially if we choose to come out as plural. Especially if fictive decide to let themselves be known. You may ask, okay, but why do you have to be open about it? You don't need to share it with people to engage in fandom. I hope you can understand why that line of thinking is painful. Even if something that is intrinsically part of you isn't essential to share, it can help explain things about you, your life, and your outlook. And it's just nice to be yourself. We say this as a system that is also queer, trans, and otherwise neurodivergent. Sometimes you just want to talk about it and not censor yourself around people. We don't always want to try and remember to say I, me, mine, myself, when it's natural for us to say we, us, ours, ourself. We don't always want to have to police our tone, our speech, and the way we walk, or things like our likes and dislikes, to appear like the same person 24/7. It feels good and freeing to be able to be yourself, without fear of judgment, without having to feel like that part of you is too weird or shameful. It feels good to open up about yourself and be true to you and know that you're accepted, that people don't think people like you are fake at best or dangerous at worst. So what can non-plural folk do to help plural folk get to that point where we can just be ourselves, even in fandom spaces? The first thing, of course, is to be open-minded. We as a society don't know everything there is to know about everything. Even if something doesn't make sense to you or sounds far-fetched, be open to the possibility that the person you're talking to might know something you don't, or have lived experiences that have brought them to the conclusion that they've arrived at. This is especially true if plural folk talk about non-traumagenic causes to their plurality, or if they have spiritual beliefs related to their plurality. It's not harming anyone in the end, and there's not really any proof that they're wrong, so it makes sense to just have a civil attitude. And speaking of plurality causes, please, for the love of everything, don't get caught up in system discourse. Telling people that their memories about their own personal history are wrong or flawed is not okay. Telling them that they're harming others just for existing is not okay. Don't tell people they're wrong or fakers for not attributing their plurality to trauma. Don't tell people that they must be disordered. Do maintain that open-mindedness and listen to people's lived experiences. If you have to get involved, or it gets brought to your doorstep somehow, as it happens online sometimes, the best thing you can do is advocate for civility and for people to not harass others just for existing. In the end, there's no study out there that says this is caused only by this, nothing else, it only ever works this way. And science really works like that anyways. Otherwise, it's best to just stay far, far away from the whole thing. Create inclusive, welcoming environments where you can. If you run a server, considering adding Pluralkit and allowing plural folks of all kinds to use it. Consider adding inclusivity to your server rules, welcoming plural folk of all origins and diagnostic statuses, and discouraging arguing about system origins and whether or not it's valid to be undiagnosed. If you talk about plurality or it comes up, use inclusive language. Plural, for example, is a standard umbrella term that welcomes folks all across the spectrum of experiences. Don't limit your scope of plurality to just trauma and disorder. If you see people who are fictives, or fictionkin, and you see that they're behaving badly, please understand that they're a loud minority. Most fictives and kinfolk just want to live in peace. If you meet someone who's being a jerk, then that's just because they're a jerk. It's not how fictives and fictionkin are universally. Please treat fictives like real people, because we are. Get to know us. We're people with our own thoughts, feelings, personalities, likes and dislikes, and beliefs about the world. We're not here to seek attention. We're not role-playing. We just want to exist and have fun in fandom like anyone else. We want to make friends and have a life. Please realize that if a fictive opens up about who they are to you and open up about their experiences, they're not trying to disrupt your enjoyment of a media source. You don't need to change how you engage with fiction. You don't need to feel weird, bad, wrong, guilty about your headcanons or any fanworks you create or enjoy. At most, it may mean you'll need to tag things more or not share specific things with that person, but that's how it is for any person you know. Fictives, by and large, aren't fragile little flowers that need to be protected from fandom. We just want to be known and seen like anyone else. If we talk about, oh yeah, I'm transmasc, or for me, I experienced XYZ instead, then it's not a condemnation of canon, the creators, or fans in their headcanons. It's just an attempt to connect and share. It's hard for a single normie person to feel seen and understood, right? Like, it's a pretty universal feeling to feel like people don't often see you for you. Fictives just have this in spades. For any plural folks in the audience, especially systems with fictives, what advice would we give to you? First of all, know that you are seen and heard. More people are acknowledging the existence of plurality, even if acceptance is slow-going and kind of a double-edged sword. Of course, you want to make sure that you're as safe as possible, but addressing stigma when you see it can help. It's easier to let fear win and to stay silent, but speaking up about your lives and experiences is how we move forward towards acceptance. Fear of the unknown does the plural community a lot of disservice. And yeah, it's true that as awareness increases, things can get harder in some ways. The trans folk among us know that all too well. But it also means more people who might not realize there's words for what they're going through, discovering that they're not alone. And it means more people who have plural loved ones might become more accepting. That said, please also note that you don't have to come out if you don't want to, or don't feel safe. There's often a huge push in queer communities to come out, and we disagree with it, here included. Violence against plural folk does exist, especially in the form of involuntary hospitalization, and potential loss of healthcare, especially for plural folks who are trans. We've known systems who have lost access to transition care after opening up about being plural. As much as we think speaking up is a wonderful thing, you have to be aware of your own safety. It's okay to only speak up when you're safe and anonymous. And this goes for even coming out to other plural folks. Unfortunately, as we said earlier, not all plural folk are going to be inclusive, accepting people, especially from a fandom angle. It's perfectly okay to wait until you know someone's views on systemhood and on shipping before opening up to them about yourselves. As nice as it is to have community, you really don't want to engage with plural folks who judge other plural folks. It's very much a face-eating leopard party situation. Eventually, they cannibalize each other, which is not as sexy as it sounds to some people, I promise. Especially if they're part of anti-shipping circles. The chances of getting harassed is so much higher. We, as a community, shouldn't have to worry about people within our own community doxing, beating, or threatening us, or telling us that we're fake, or just role players. But that's the reality right now. It's sad. You don't have to and shouldn't accept those kinds of people into your circles. Sticking up for systems and plural people of all origins, diagnostic statuses, and belief on how their systems work is in our best interest. We're stronger together, and fandom can be a great place to find common ground. Even if you're skeptical about a system being non-traumagenic or having spiritual views, or whatever, as long as they're not harming others, find the common ground. Find the things you share and build off that. Get to know people. Knowing people and caring about them, laughing together, having fun together, defending our rights together, is how we stay safe and get stronger as a community. Regardless of whether or not you're out to anyone, or engage with fandom on a community level, don't be afraid to express yourselves. We've met so many fictives and systems who want to roleplay as themselves, write fanfic that feels accurate to things they remember, do fan art, etc., but they get anxious about it because, well, what if I'm actually just role-playing and not who I think at all? What if this means I really am fake? We've had those worries for a long time too, especially when we were younger. But it's just the anxiety talking. Even if it's just for you, even if you're the only one who understands it, do it. Make that mood board, write that story, draw that art, role-play, make playlists, whatever the hell you want to do. Role-playing and writing fic helped many fictives here examine traumatic experiences. It felt less stressful because we could do it from a sort of second-person perspective, giving us some distance from it. And hell, it can even just be for fun, or for horny reasons, whatever. It's all okay, we promise. You're allowed to create, and you're allowed to share. You're allowed to express joy, pain, sexuality, gender. You're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to do anything that non-plural people are allowed to do. Just remember to be gentle on other creators and fans. I'm sure most of you listening already know this, but most people are playing in their own sandboxes with their own versions of the source material. Unless someone is targeting you specifically in an attempt to upset you, random artists and writers are just having fun with their own ideas. They could be someone trying to explore their own pain and joy, or even be another system, or a fiction canon person working through things. Either way, they're not trying to hurt you. If you see a pairing or trope you don't like, mute it, block the artist, add it to filtered words, whatever you need to do. Just remember that whatever problems you have with it, they're your problems. It's good to remember to be gentle on non-plural folk in general, too. This is something that is very new to a lot of people and can often seem really strange at first. We're all here learning, exploring, and trying to figure life out, right? As long as people aren't being abusive to you, if they seem a little awkward or ignorant, be patient. Give them time. Try and help them learn. No, we shouldn't have to always provide that emotional labor, but it's no longer an option to tell people to just Google shit. They get AI answers, boo, at best. At worst, they stumble into exclusive, hateful rhetoric, actual misinformation, like the idea that plural folk never know they're plural, or Hollywoodized bullshit, stares intently at split, glass, etc. Even if it's tiring, we have to put in a bit of the work to direct people to good resources as much as possible. Lastly, to younger and or newer systems, please listen to older systems and learn about community history. So much is being forgotten or outright ignored. It's especially difficult with the internet being the way that it is and so many older resources getting deleted, Systems, including fictives within systems, have a long and complex history. So much community infighting could, or should, be stopped if folks just listened and learned about their own community history. Old farts do, in fact, sometimes know what they're talking about. And knowing that history helps protect against bigots who insist that we're just some new TikTok or Tumblr trend. So, at the end of this, our time together, we've explored what it means to be plural. We've talked about fictives and struggles we face in fandom, as well as things plural and non-plural folk can keep in mind to foster a better environment together. If we had to summarize 3 points for our closing statement, what would those points be? First, that plurality is a perfectly normal part of society. Whether it's formed from trauma or not, disordered or not, it's something that impacts millions across the world, at minimum. It's not inherently scary or dangerous, it just exists, and there's a lot that can be done to help plural folk feel more comfortable in the world and in fandom. Second, fictives are a normal part of the plural community, and often the ones who get hit with the most crap in fandom spaces. Fictives, in general, don't want to cause discomfort or make people feel like they can't enjoy media. Most just want to exist and be accepted for who they are without condemnation, and engage with fandoms in ways that are enjoyable to them. Those who cause trouble are a minority. Lastly, while there are a lot of challenges in fandom for plural folk, especially systems with fictives, there are ways to make environments more welcoming and inclusive. Explicitly including all types of plural folk in forum and server roles, discouraging system discourse, and adding accessibility features like Pluralkit are great ways to help plural folk feel more at ease. Giving plural folks time, space, and patience to explain their personal experiences, and being open-minded to those experiences, goes a long way. Plurality doesn't have to be some weird, taboo topic, or some mysterious and scary thing. Fandom spaces can be welcoming to fictives and fiction can. It just takes a little extra effort, willingness to learn, and some compassion. Thank you all for coming to our panel. We hope this helped you understand a bit more about plurality and how it can impact fandom experiences. Feel free to DM us with any questions or for further resources. We can be found at Gqueercatboy on Blue Sky and Tumblr for our fandom content, and the Lunastus Co. on Blue Sky and Tumblr for our system stuff. We hope you enjoy the rest of CitrusCon. Keep letting that freak flag fly.